So many people were wrong about the Nintendo Switch 2. People thought it was going to be a failure. Heck, even I didn't think it would do this well. According to Nintendo themselves, Nintendo Switch 2 has sold over 3.5 million units worldwide in its first 4 days, becoming the fastest selling Nintendo hardware ever globally. That is an impressive feat, and if you want a point of comparison to the original Nintendo Switch, according to GameSpot, the first Switch sold 2.74 million units in its first month. How did we get here? Why is the Switch 2 doing so well? Will it manage to sustain this level of success? Or is it going to falter out? Let's get into it, let's talk about it. Hello everyone, I am Jmulls. And the Switch 2 arguably is the most polarizing console launch of all time. It's at least up there. You have people that make it borderline their entire personality to hate on this thing, and then others who are absolutely over the moon about it. I got my own copy of the Switch 2 because I'm a sucker for Xenoblade, yes I am. And I will say my first impressions with this piece of kit have been absolutely stellar. It's been pretty much everything I wanted out of a Switch 2. The hybrid nature of a Switch, just with better form factor, it feels better in my hands, it's larger, and is more powerful. I don't need something with top-of-the-line graphics, I have a PC for that. So personally, what the Switch 2 provides and offers appeals to me on a lot of levels. But why is the Switch 2 doing so well? Because there's plenty of things we can level at it to critique it, right? The price point being a big one, but also the price point of certain games for the Switch 2 going to $80 that the rest of the industry, hello Xbox, have essentially piggybacked. And because of reasons like that, I didn't think it would do as well as the Switch 1, but I by no means thought it would be a financial failure, anything like that. I always thought it was going to do pretty well, just not Switch 1 levels of success. Well, it's not doing Switch 1 levels of success, it's doing even better. I think there's a couple of reasons going for the Switch 2 that could lend themselves as giant reasons for its immediate success. I think the biggest one is the high likelihood that Nintendo actually made enough supply to meet demand. This has been a frequent issue with Nintendo launches for the longest time now. There would never be enough product to meet all the people that wanted to buy it, and you would find yourself waiting so long just to find any in stock anywhere. I was actually surprised when I got the email saying, hey, you can now order the Switch 2 online from the Nintendo store. I thought I was going to have to wait months, if not like half a year or so, but no, I didn't have to do any of that. And mine came in the mail on launch day. And I think, at least anecdotally, this could be the biggest reason we're seeing this much success for the Switch 2, is that the demand was always there, it was just a matter of can Nintendo produce enough supply. And it seems, at least for this go-around, they largely have. People like Nintendo games, they like the form factor, they like the functionality, they like the hybridization of the Switch. The original Switch was a piece of kit that came onto the scene at just the right time when that demand was starting to awaken across a lot of players. And the Switch 2 is piggybacking off that success in a market where we now see a bunch of similar-like devices coming out, but a lot of people's demand for Nintendo and Nintendo games is still right there. And I think it's easy to argue that perhaps the Switch 2 itself is overpriced, but in comparison to a lot of the competition, it is still on the cheaper side of things. It's not cheap by any stretch of the imagination, but like when you look at comparisons to a lot of these other devices that don't provide Nintendo games, they can be pretty pricey. Let's also be fair here, Nintendo is a recognizable brand. The Nintendo Switch is a recognizable brand. People find comfort and familiarity in recognizable brands. They know the Switch, they're familiar with it. Offering the same thing they already like but better is a largely winning strategy. Especially in a market where a lot of people are nervous and hesitant to take a bunch of big risks on things they don't know or are not familiar with. You combine those factors alongside seemingly Nintendo actually making enough supply to meet demand, as we talked about before, I think that has led to this early powerhouse in terms of sales figures for the Switch 2. One of the biggest things, especially when it comes to gaming, is convenience. People treasure it, and no amount of online discourse about misrepresented elements of the Switch 2 is going to move the needle in comparison to just what provides the most convenience for most people. It's why we have seen the market go in the way of digital gaming largely, because people treasure that convenience. It's why it's a growing sector of the video game market. It's way more convenient to just boot up an online store, get the game you want, and then start playing after a download than it is to go out to some store, get the game, and then come all the way back to your place to be able to then play the game. Especially nowadays when most of the games you seemingly get physically, you still have to do a sizable download for. A lot of people would rather just wait in the mail for it to come or just get it digitally. And while there are a lot of valid and justified concerns and worries about true ownership in the video game industry, absolutely. The fact of the matter is, most people just want to play a video game and they don't particularly care about any of this stuff. They just want to play a game and enjoy themselves and escape from the rest of the world, or they want to play with their friends and buddies. The Switch did that brilliantly, and the Switch 2 is just doing that, but arguably even better. Let's also face it, Mario Kart is a massive IP, and that is an IP that can and has moved units by itself. It's why the Switch 2 is launching with Mario Kart, and a pretty dang good Mario Kart. I haven't been this hooked on a Mario Kart game since Double Dash, and having Mario Kart World as a launch title for the Switch 2, seemingly at least, has done rather well for the Switch 2, especially since there's a bundle for the Switch 2 where Mario Kart World is only valued at $50. Way more digestible for a lot of people than the initial box price of $80. Combine that with everyone being cognizant of the fact that more Nintendo games are going to come out, we already have an announcement for another Splatoon game, albeit a spin-off. People know Nintendo brings the games, and people know that Nintendo's going to bring more games. So however you feel about the current launch window of the Switch 2, people know in the back of their minds that eventually they're going to want this thing if they like Nintendo games. And if you already have a bunch of Switch games, well, a decent number of them will look and play better on the Switch 2. People like the things they like, it's as simple as that. People like Nintendo, they like the Switch. Having another version of that does everything they already like but better is a very tantalizing offer for a lot of people. And when Nintendo is actually able or willing to create enough supply to meet that demand, I think the success of the Switch 2 becomes extremely reasonable. The biggest question, though, in my mind, will the Switch 2 manage to sustain this level of success? And that's a really tough question, because unless the market has just grown so much, I'm still not of the opinion that the Switch 2 is going to outperform, in terms of total overall sales, the original Switch. And this could just be an example of the type of sales Nintendo can accrue early on when they actually meet demand, and a bunch of people don't have to wait over time to get the console. It's entirely possible that the sales of the Switch 2 eventually fizzle out, and we can have a discussion if that happens as to why that's happening. Perhaps in the long term, the price of the Switch 2 and the price of games overall will just become too much and it will phase a lot of people out, or a giant sector of the more casual market will just resign themselves to say, you know what, the Switch 1 is good enough for us. That could happen, but we have to wait and see. But I think it's fair to say that the success of the Switch 2 early on has been kind of crazy. I don't know many people that actually unironically thought it was going to do this well, especially in comparison to the original Switch. And it's another example that a lot of online quote-unquote controversy or drama doesn't really translate that much to actual statistics. Every now and then you can kind of glean an idea from it, but you always have to bear in mind when you see some giant online controversy or a bunch of anger and sentiment about a particular topic, that's just a bunch of loud people online, most of the time, and the vast majority of the time. Most people, most of the consumers, aren't paying attention to that stuff, and if they think something appeals to them enough, and is within their means to acquire it, they're going to do it. Like, dude, here's a statistic that is absolutely crazy. The Wii U sold 13.56 million copies total. Within 4 days, the Switch 2 has sold over a quarter of that. Within 4 days. It's just like, that number puts things into perspective. And you want to know the really funny thing? One of the reasons the Switch did so well was because it was viewed as the budget-friendly option to get into like console gaming in comparison to PlayStation and Xbox. And while people view the Switch 2 to be expensive right now, when we get the next generation, I'm not counting the Asus like handheld things for Xbox, when we get the next generation from Xbox and PlayStation, they are almost certainly going to be way more expensive. So retroactively, Nintendo will be viewed as the budget-friendly option yet again. On top of having the Switch 1 games be playable on it, on top of all the games that are going to come out for the Switch 2. So it's like, yeah, I think the numbers for the Switch 2 will eventually start to slow down, but the biggest question for me is, how much will it actually just slow down? In a lot of ways, Nintendo took a gamble. There was a bunch of sour discourse online about the Switch 2, and there still is. I'm sure that you all have seen the vitriol that has surrounded this console, leading up to its release and since its release. Nintendo pretty much just said, here's a Switch 2, here's some basic online features, oh and by the way, here's a Mario Kart. And that's all they had to do. Nintendo knew they could get away with so many things. Having the game chat button on your controllers require a subscription to use. The price of the console and the price of games like Mario Kart themselves. They could even allow the misconception about game keys to continue to exist alongside this whole discussion people have had about whether or not you actually own the Switch 2. They could allow all of that to exist because they knew their brand was strong enough. Because they knew the IP of Mario Kart had so much pull that they knew people would still buy it anyways. Nintendo could afford to take this gamble because they knew in their heart of hearts they provided products and services that people wanted. And so long as they got the important stuff right, offering the hardware people liked, just better, with a few new shiny features, a brand spanking new and really good Mario Kart, some upgrades to pre-existing libraries of the Switch 1. That would be enough. The gamble was worth it. At least in the short term right now. We'll have to see how the Nintendo Switch 2 continues to sell down the line though. We'll see if it's able to continue this pace, if it slows down, or if, like, God forbid, it somehow speeds up. But you have to imagine Nintendo's rather pleased with themselves with the success of the Switch 2. And I've been liking the console even more than I thought I was going to. Heck, one of my favorite games to play on is not just Mario Kart World, it's Bravely Default. In a lot of ways, the Switch 2 appeals more to me and what I wanted out of the original Switch than the original Switch did. It's more comfortable in my hands, it's a bigger screen, I prefer that. It is decently more powerful, and a couple of the games that I really like from the Switch play better on it. Are there issues with the Switch 2? Absolutely. Does this mean you can't criticize Nintendo or the Switch 2? Absolutely not. I'm going to continue to do so because I'm a loud dude on the internet. But perspective is necessary. The truth is necessary. And with that, I'll call the video there for the day. Thank you all for tuning in. My pleasure for making the video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out and help support future content, and I greatly appreciate it. Stay safe. Have a great day. Leave a comment down below with, if you have a Switch 2, do you like your purchase? What do you like about the console? What are you looking forward to in regards to the console? I'd love to hear your thoughts and hear your opinions and hear your perspectives. And if you haven't gotten a Switch 2, why or why not? Or are you going to get one down the line? Likewise, I would love to hear your thoughts, hear your opinions, and hear your perspectives. Stay safe, have a great day, go play some video games, and I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye, everybody, until we meet again.